Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Epic Dies by Ken Epp. That's me. I'm going to be making for you today what I'm going to call a sunflower fan. It's a side fan, which you can see the final product there. It's a fan fold. It's my typical fan fold. I do have a video on just a fan fold, and you can manipulate it any way you like. So we're going to start the layout. I put a screw in a board, take a piece of string with predetermined knots. I have loops tied in, and so I pretty much use these same ones every time. We can go either side. We can go this side, we can go this side. It works good either way. Pretty close. And we'll make a couple arcs here. And I have the washable fabric pins by Crayola that I use. They seem to work pretty well. And on this one, we're just going to do 2 arcs. And then I also like to measure on this smaller arc here. If you make it on the bigger arc, you don't know how it's going to end up at the end here. But I know that if I go a couple inches here between fan lines, that the lines will stay far enough apart. We'll have some detail in here if we want it, and it won't get too big over here so that we can't get it to saturate completely. So we'll make these marks as quick as we can, get the fan line snapped, and then we'll go and I'll show you how I put in some chevrons to create the leaves, the petals of the sunflower. And we'll go ahead and do a little one there. Okay, and I do my lines using the Constructions chalk line, because I was a plumbing contractor and I have lots of tools. And this dust will wash out, it won't hurt anything. It's a quick way just to snap some lines. Plus those fabric markers are expensive. And those things, I will go through a lot as many shirts as I make. So this chalk's pretty darn cheap. If you get the chalk box, you have to add the chalk occasionally. Not too often. But you do have to recoat the string occasionally, so that the line ends up dark enough so we can actually see it, follow it. And you can do the ray distances on this line, whatever you'd like. You know, it's all trial and error. Here I did it 2 inches apart. And I make a little mark off the board so I can give myself a snap right there. A little line just so I can make everything even all the way across. Okay. Now we've got that. We go ahead and figure out the distance up here, because we're going to have the center of the top of our petal is going to be in the center. So we're going to mark off the centers, which it's not going to be perfect, but no one's eyes are that good that they'll be able to tell the difference. They turn out pretty nice. These lines vary, maybe up here by 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch. It's fine. Of course, you know, the more accurate we are, the smaller the margin of error. Just typical for any kind of technical work you're gonna do. If you try to be more accurate, any mistakes will be less noticeable. See, and so we can just like fake continue the line up here. And I know it's like 2 inches off of here, so we'll mark it there. So when we make our lines, we can just kind of fake it. See, so what I'll do is, pretending that's the top of the arc, we'll just make this one here like this. See, so the rays stay basically the same shape throughout. That one's more like that. And up here we'll go somewhere in the middle here. It's pretty close. Nobody will know the difference. Okay, and up here we're actually back to the real arc, so we can be right on. And see what I'm doing is I'm going to each of the blue lines is going to be another chevron down here, and that's going to be the bottom of the petal, or the closer to the center of the flower, or the fan, whichever you'd like to call it. Yeah, this is only my second time doing this one, but it's pretty simple. And if you made a mistake and drew a line in the wrong place, it's no big deal. You just put little X's through it. I've done that plenty of times. And honestly, these are so close together up at the top here, we're not even going to be exactly on these lines. They're just guidelines. You know, the dye will spread in the fabric the way that it wants to, and so as long as we're, you know, pretty close, it'll look pretty nice. And we'll just make a little fake one there. Okay, so that's the setup of it. Clean some stuff up here. And we're just going to tie this with loose sinew when we're all done. I like to sit down when I do my folding. Just, yeah, it's more comfortable. Anything to make it more comfortable. So like I say, we don't want to be exactly on that line. We're kind of going to go to the outside here. We pinch above where the V is, where the chevron is up here. Pinch it, push your finger down the middle, make it kind of tight, and then pinch them. And like I say, we kind of want to round them. So we'll go outside a little, but we'll end up back at the center at the bottom here. So that way it looks like a little flower petal. Go outside a little bit, and then come back to the middle. And so as we make it, we're going to pinch that guy there. Yep. Pinch it. And give it a little spray. I do not soda ash soak any of my garments. My hands do not like it, and there's no reason for it at all. There's no need to pre-soak. I put on the soda ash after I'm all done. And so what we're wanting to do is line the arc up as we go. And so we'll pinch where the chevron is, or the tip of the leaf. Not leaf, these are actually flower petals on this design. On the Tropical Nova, we're making it look like leaves, at least I do. I mean, you could color it any way you like, call it whatever you want. It's your art. Okay, do a little pinch down here. And I have a tool I use too. Let me grab that just to show you. You don't necessarily need it for this one. This is not very intricate. They're kind of big and unwieldy though. And I have some clamps, different sizes. So we can put some clamps on here as we go. Keep stuff together. Speeds it up. So we'll just work back and forth. Pretty simple. We'll go ahead and use this tool. Why not? Put it in there, pinch. Yeah, it works a lot better. We'll do this one. It's just a pair of tweezers with a little spade tip. But I use the rounded edge and push down in. Anything that isn't going to tear or rip your garment, cut it. And down here we're going to stay on these lines. So it'll be like the center of the flower. And up here we'll pinch. Get both sides working a little. Pinch it on the V. Top of the chevron. You can bring that guy in here. Clamp it off. And we'll just continue working it. And if you give them a nice pinch, top and bottom, once you get it set where you want, we'll go back and clean all this up. This stuff is pretty messy right now, but it'll be fine when we're done. But if you give it a little pinch, then you'll find that even if you have it a little bit damp, it'll stay together. The fabric's pretty easy to work with. I use the heavy Gildan, heavy cotton Gildan ones. I use the PFDs that are prepared for dyeing because I like the cotton stitching. I can't stand the my final product showing the white polypropylene stitching or whatever kind of plastic they use to stitch the cheap t-shirts these days. So I like them to be cotton stitching. The PFDs comes with cotton stitching, so you never see the white lines on the stitching of these garments. The stitching dyes to the color of whatever color dye you have on that area of the shirt. The stitching will dye to that color. That's really pleasing to my eye. Not a big fan of seeing the white stitching on them. Though I gotta say, these shirts are a little bit stiff to wear. They're not the most soft cotton. But as far as like a piece of art, they turn out pretty nice. And they take the dye really well. We'll clean all this up when we're done. Right now we're just trying to get the bulk of the work done. So I'll get a little clamp on this guy right here. Make sure we don't have to fix him too much again. All right. And then what I did with my original there in the background, you could see how out here, beyond this outer arc, is it's pretty blurry because I did a gravity dye on it. I hung it over the edge of my gutter. I used like a gutter, like a standard one for doing incline. I inclined the center out, and then this hung down dead vertical, and I'll show you on the dyeing portion. Pretty fun to play with that. I've seen a lot of really nice work being produced, people using that effect lately. Yeah, we can make gravity our friend, right? A lot of times you'll be cursing because gravity's pulling something down, but in ice dyeing, we make it our friend. Get some nice looking effects. And once again, this is not perfect right now. I'm just getting going on it. We'll come back later and fix it all up perfect. Remember to pinch. See, I forgot there. Remember to pinch this here, pinch the sides of the pleats together so that we can make some nice sharp edges on top. We want everything to line up at the end. Underneath it's not lining up, but the top will. So I'm picking everything up to match right here. This is the important part. We're actually going to dye this one upside down so the muck gets into each of these flower petals, chevrons. And it looks really cool. Makes that whole cool leaf effect. There we go. I'm cleaning this up a little now just because. All right. About halfway done, I think. Pretty close. Pinch that. Bring it in here. Why don't we get another clamp over here? I keep them clamped to my shelf there. They're very easy to grab. There we go. Just put a little clampy there. And I do have a board on that side of the table which I could use to fold this against, but I find this fold's not that difficult. It goes pretty quick, so that thing gets in the way. Sometimes you got to reach over it. It's helpful, but it also can get in the way. So just trying to speed up the process here for the sake of the video. It's pretty boring watching me do every one of these folds, I'm sure. And this leaves a little moisture, a couple little sprays. And I don't really start out with my garments wet either. I keep them in a bag. I wash everything I get, from my supplier in Synthropol and hot water, and then I'll just take them. I throw them in the dryer just to get them dry, because I've had, if I just threw them in a bag when they're damp, I've had them mold on me, mildew, and that's, it's not that it doesn't die. It'll die right through that, but breathing mold, mildew, and stuff while you're folding up, that's not good. Doesn't sound good to me. So I just let everything dry, and I wet it with a little spray bottle. It's just plain water, no soda ash. We add the soda ash when we dye. I do. There's different ways you can do it. There's the pariah method, which is what a lot of the liquid dyers use, pariah, and they'll just add their liquid to a garment with no soda ash on it, and then they will either hot or cold soda ash water, depending what their process is. Hot obviously makes it bond quicker, right? Because the Prosound dyes, the bonding happens with heat and time. And so the temperature and time that it takes to make each different color of dye, because they're chemicals, they're all made up of different chemicals. They adhere to the cotton, they fix to the cotton at a different rate, depending on temperature. And there's a chart you can get, which shows, I think it's 24 hours at 70 degrees is pretty much average for all dyes. And it's 12 hours at 80 degrees. I just remember those two numbers. I live in a pretty warm climate here in New Mexico. And it's my garage, except in the wintertime, my garage stays pretty warm. And what I'll do in the winter is I'll get a heat mat, like for seed starting. And then I'll use that to heat my garments. I'll go ahead and get my garment all dyed. When it's all dyed up, I'll batch it inside plastic wrap. I just get the Costco cling wrap, big old rolls of it, and then I'll roll it out and I'll wrap my garment up in that, and I'll set it on a heat mat. And the heat mat gets pretty hot. I think they're up in the 90s or 100s. They get pretty hot. So let it sit in that, 8, 10, whatever hours, and you're done. One thing I've learned, I try not to be in a hurry when doing my dyeing, because I've ruined way too many shirts trying to take shortcuts on batching or on folding. So you take your time and you get out of it what you put into it. That's the way I look at it. If you take a little extra time folding something, making sure the pleats are all right, the final product is that much better. And same with the batching. Don't be in a hurry to wash stuff out. And you want to make sure you add enough soda ash. I mean, there's probably such a thing as too much when it starts hardening and crusting into like crystals on your shirt. that's probably too much. You're just wasting at that point. But I always find that, in my mind, soda ash is cheaper than the dye and garments. So I'm not so concerned about, you know, worrying about how much soda ash I use. I use a little more probably than a lot of dyers think is necessary. And that's fine. Everyone has their own way. We all have our own preferences and found out what works for us. This is just what works for me. I'm not like the end-all expert on anything. I just love doing this, and I appreciate you showing up to watch me fumble around with this thing. Like I say, this is only the second time I've done this one, and these long chevrons are a little finicky, kind of a pain in the butt. But like I say, patience, we'll get there. See, in each of these folds is going to go from one side of the line to the other, because we're making them arced a little, so they look like the flower petals. I get a lot of my ideas for doing dyes while I'm hiking or walking my dog or bike riding. Something in nature will give me an idea. Like, I know how to do chevrons. I thought, hey, what if I did some big ones, made some flower petals? I have a lot of sunflowers out in my yard right now, and it kind of inspired me to come up with this one. And I'm sure it's been done before. I seriously doubt that I have invented anything. It's just new to me. Now, if you put too much moisture too far ahead of yourself, the fabric pen will start spreading, and they will also bleed the different colors that it's made out of, like split. Whatever color makes up this black marker, it'll start turning blue or green around it. Then you'll lose the center. And you can kind of fake it, I guess. But then, you know, the accuracy's gone. And I mean, I'm not being super accurate here, but I kind of want to make them roughly the same so it looks nice on the final product. Looks like I knew what I was doing. They're not random. See, and where the collar is, it's always a pain in the butt to get it just right. Now, I'm sure this isn't perfect, but like I've said, the dye will travel where it's going to travel on ice dyeing. We don't have too much control, we have some. So don't get too carried away with accuracy. And once again, it's all trial and error. It's whatever you want the final product to look like. It's your art. There is really no right or wrong way to do this. This is just what I do. And we want to try to keep everything flat once again as we go. It's not perfect right now. By the time I'm done, it will be. It'll be pretty close to being perfect. And you got to make sure you keep the bottom layer of fabric touching the top layer, right? Because that's how the dye transfers, is by contact. It's going to be going through. So we have to keep both layers touching as we go. We don't want to pick up just the top layer. That'd be just the front of the shirt. The bottom won't get the design. It'll be all just blurry. That would be the back of the shirt. It would just be blurry. And I do not do my shirts, dye them, or fold them inside out. I have not found that makes a bit of difference. The dye travels right through the thin layers. I never found that it made any difference to me at all. If I screwed up and put blotches and had speckles, they're on both sides. I know a lot of people would argue with me, say I'm full of it, but that's what I found, so I don't waste my time with it. I'm sure every professional dyer in the world does his inside out. I just don't care. Doesn't make any difference on my work that I've found. And I am not a professional dyer. I'm a hobbyist. I sell my stuff, but I don't consider myself professional. I have a long way to go to learn enough for that. I've just mastered a few little folds, figured out how to get the dye to penetrate and saturate the fabric a little bit. And I thought I would, you know, why not start a YouTube channel? Help people out that are just doing it for fun like me. Okay, so we're pretty much done there. So what I'm going to do, I have this big bag of used sinew, and I don't care what I get. It could be frayed, it makes no difference. All we're going to do is loosely wrap this as if it was a supernova. Yeah, I don't even care if there's knots or something. As long as there's not in the way, not a knot in the way of my slip knot, because we're going to do a slip knot here. Start out just doing a little granny knot around. The end goes around the main part, and that way it slips. So this stuff here, that'll stay. So let's let this, we'll start at the very center. And we'll just go right on my snap lines, my ray lines, fan lines, whatever you like to call them. And in this case, they're blue. So I know the blue ones have to be on top. And you gotta look out for, like this one here, going acrossways. That was just the string. And most of you will use fabric markers, so it won't be an issue. I just have that chalk line thing. I think it's fun. No one else does it that way. It's just my thing. When I first started dyeing, my wife wanted to figure out how to do a perfect fan fold, and no one really showed how to do them perfectly. They just showed random kind of grabbing and making your fans like Mr. Tie-Dye's original. I don't know if he does it more accurate now, but he didn't draw them out, and my wife wanted to have them really tight. And so me being a construction guy, I looked at that and said, oh, I can do that. Give me a screw. I got a board here I can put screws in. It's not a table. And so I use the screw as the center, and I just take a string and do my arcs off of that screw. And I went out to my work truck and got my chalk line and just snapped them out, because I didn't have any fancy washable fabric pens at the time. It was just starting out. We'll give this a little more liquid here. Okay, this one's a little tight, so this is a little bit small. That's good for the start, but I just want to have one now, any old one. Fumble around with this stuff. Let me get some scissors. It's just a bunch of garbage. I just like to recycle. So I want to put one around here. Just slide it under, keep it flat on the ground, on the board when you're sliding it under. I'm just going to put a slip knot on here, temporary, just to hold this together. Now, if I have a bigger clamp, but the clamp tends to put too much pressure and they get all wonky, all the pleats. So this is pretty good for now. So we'll just pull it together, keep it a little tight while we deal with this. And now I'm down in here just getting all my rays all lined up, all the blue lines straight on top, whatever color marker you use. And occasionally squeeze them, you know, and if they're damp, they'll hold a lot better. Mine are somewhat dry. As you see, I just spray occasionally. Not too concerned. And this center here probably isn't even going to show up a lot of these lines. They probably won't even show up. They'll probably just blur away, because I'm just trying to make it like the center of a flower. Don't necessarily need the fan effect all the way to the center. Okay, that's pretty good. So I got my slip knot here. I just raise this a little, not too much now. We don't want all this getting messed up. So we'll just put that guy right in there. And that holds that together nicely. Pull it tight. Okay, so then we'll make sure the folds are good here. Everything wants to be the same level. Now the tweezers can come in. and I can pull the ones up that are down. You want everything to be up the top. That way it saturates equally across the whole arc of this fan fold. This really is just a fan fold. And I'll put a thing around there, pull a little tight, thing around there, pull a little tight. There we go. Now we're getting somewhere. All right. Now we get up here to these rays. We want to clean them up. This is pretty good right in here. This looks pretty nice. And like this line, the arc line, do you see how it's messed up? We could try to get it perfect. But even if it's not, when you're placing your powder dye, you can just follow that line. Okay, it doesn't matter. And then the arc will be perfect. That line is the perfect arc of the shirt. The first smallest one I made. So there. Everything's pretty good. So now we're not going to lift it up anymore because we don't want to mess stuff up. We'll keep it flat on the board. Pull it that way. And you can go front to back, back to front. And then I put this thumb down on the string and this thumb down. You can use string. You can use anything for this. Fishing line, it doesn't matter, whatever you have, because we're just holding it loosely together. Though I do find that cotton string, if you have like kite string or something, sometimes it'll tend to absorb the dye, and then you might have the lines. That's the one thing about the wax sinew, is it does not absorb the dye, right? It's got wax on it. So it'll be nice and clean. You won't see the lines of the sinew in most cases. Sometimes it might run down, but usually not, in my experience. All right, so we're gonna clean these up here pretty good now. So this guy here is kind of wonky. That's where we want the tip, right there. So push that in, push that down, squeeze. And we want to get all these pulled up. Any ones that fell down, get them pulled up. Go through and look at each one. Yeah, see this one's down a little. And you can, you know, pull one side up a little more than the other to make sure that everything gets saturated evenly with the dye. So we have a nice pattern at the end. All right, and then you hold, I put my finger down the middle to hold the middle because you don't want the ends will be lower. We don't want the ends lower. If anything, we want the ends the ones on the end a tad bit up so that when we're putting our powder dye, it doesn't fall off. I had that happen all the time. Yeah, I'm sure you all have. Okay, so everything looks pretty good there. We'll pull this guy a little snug. And once we get it all tied up, we can also manipulate it again by pulling stuff up, pushing stuff down. Yeah, that's pretty good. Get my little temporary slip knot back out of the way over here. Maybe pull it over there so we don't mess that up. All right. And we'll just go every couple of inches, inch or two, whatever. Make sure everything's pulled up. Make sure everything's at the same level. That's key. See, this guy here thinks he's getting away down here. Nope, sorry. You're coming back, bud. Not getting away from me. And we can take this and we can push it down to make each pleat the same size. Because that's one thing, is when you're working with pleats, if you're making one larger, the one next to it has to get smaller, right? So that way it's even. So if you see one sticking up too high, chances are the one next to it is too low. Yeah, see? And we just work our tool straight up here, getting each of these worked out pretty good. I mean, it's not going to be 100% perfect, but better it is, the more chances we're going to end up with the design we desire. The more accurate we can be, right? So that one's down there. That guy up. These are a little tall. I'll push them down a little. This guy's sagging. Yeah. You go back and clean up at any time. So I call it a cleanup process. this guy's a little tall here. We get these guys up. Push this dude down. Like I say, I could be in a hurry here and just jam right through this, but you wouldn't understand how I come out with that pattern over there. A little time consuming, but it's well worth it on the final product. And on this one, I do dye under ice, or that one right there, I did dye under ice and dye over ice. I did both. This thing here, we're just going to get rid of it. We're done. All right. And the dye under ice is a more accurate way of knowing where the dye is going to flow, obviously. And the dye over ice, right, it will cover more of an area, and you can't always be sure exactly where it's going to go. It's kind of fun because I did 2 colors over the ice on that one. See, and even these knots and stuff in this sinew, I've used this so many times, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't affect anything. The only thing it might do is catch on to another piece of sinew underneath when you're pulling it around and through. But you just yank it through. It's fine. As long as you're holding stuff tight in your hand. You want to keep it a little bit tight. You know, not tight enough to use the sinew and crank it so that it pulls and makes a sinew line, a big resist. It's just to hold everything together so that we can get into the dyeing area. Because I dye in a different place than where I fold. I fold in here and I dye in my garage. I don't want to get that stuff in my house. I think that breathing soda ash and Prosound dyes really has had hurt my lungs in the past, and so I stick away from it. I wear a mask whenever I'm dealing with the Prosound dyes. You get a pretty good dust mask, fine dust mask, and it'll save your lungs. Now, Mr. Tie-Dye has said that he believes that it can also cause allergies to the dye, and if you breathe too much soda ash, you can get allergies to that, and it'll get so bad where you will not be able to dye anymore. And now, wouldn't that suck if you couldn't do your favorite hobby because you didn't take the precautions to protect your body? So yeah, be very safe around chemicals. Always wear the masks. All right, so this guy looks good. I cut that off there. Tuck it back in here so it stays. Pull it through. Okay. And so there you go. We have a fan folded with the sunflower petals. And I'll dye it next. I'm going to pause the video. Okay, everybody, I'm back. About to do some dyeing. So what I do is I take a piece of gutter and I just tape some window screen on there. And if there's a slit underneath, that's fine, especially for this. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully slide this up onto the slit in the screen, right up to the point just past where the petals are going to end. Because what we want to do is we're going to put nice bright colors in here for the flower petals, and then at the very end here I'll put a different color, and it'll bleed down, get some gravity flow. So that's why I left this all loose. The rest of the shirt's going to have a gravity flow. So let's see what we can get here. All right, so I've got my mask. I have one of these Moldex dust masks. And I'm going to start out with Raven in the center. And then I'm going to put some little deep yellow. Some Raven, deep yellow. no, we'll go pomegranate. Raven, pomegranate, deep yellow. Then I'm going to put ice over the top, and I'm going to put a couple different colors on top. We'll do bright yellow, and maybe we'll mix in some pomegranate or red wine. They're very similar. So yeah, let's see what we get. I like to do over the top. I was doing some lines of it so it gets a little flow. I mean over the ice. So under the ice, dye under ice will be Raven, deep yellow, and maybe we'll do a pomegranate right at the end. I mean, it's just fun. See what we get. I have a little paper towel that I wipe my spoon. I have these spoons, and I'll wipe it after each color so we don't contaminate them. And I don't mind if I spill some, because since we're going to fill this up with ice, it'll create a muck and it'll flow on the bottom lines, and that way, you know what? I made a mistake. This is supposed to be done upside down. I made a big mistake.